In this video, I want to give an account of what I saw take place during the HEX launch and what I think it means. This is the full disclosure video, to the best of my ability and the most controversial aspects of HEX, how it's structured and why. To the best of my knowledge, nobody in the Hexagon community has made a video like this before, probably because it's in the past and only those paying close attention would be able to see what I'm about to describe. It's also a touchy subject that can scare new investors away if it's not addressed properly. And if I'm honest, this requires some trust and faith in the founder in the crypto space that's built on trustless, decentralized principles. But I'll leave it up to you, the potential new Hexagon, to weigh and measure. This is called the HEX Launch and Origin Address. And how does a coin that inflates 3.69% per year pay on average 38% APY? HEX launched on December 2nd, 2019. It launched with 0 coins day one and hyperinflated for 350 days. Each day, a new pool was created where roughly 500 million HEX coins were up for grabs in what was called the adoption amplifier. Anyone in the world was allowed to send Ethereum to the adoption amplifier, and if they were 1% of the Ethereum sent to the pool that day, they received 1% of the available coins, plus bonuses. It was clearly stated over and over that the Ethereum sent to the adoption amplifier will never benefit you or HEX in any way. It's gone. You must have no expectations of profit from the work of others regarding HEX because HEX is not a security. You are not buying stock in a company because HEX is not a company. Richard Hart does not work for you, and he never will. 1/3 of the HEX supply was offered for Bitcoin holders to free claim. And every week that they waited to claim, they lost 2% of their free claim until the 50-week launch ended. On the final day of the HEX launch, the unclaimed HEX from the Bitcoin free claim was distributed to stakers in the HEX share pool on November 19th, 2020 in an event called the Big Payday. The HEX User's Manual mentions an entity called the Origin Address, or the OA. To this day, I don't know what the Origin Address is for or who controls it, and I will offer up some reasons why. I can tell you what I've witnessed the Origin Address do. I suspect Richard Hart has a large say-so, if not full control, of the Origin Address, and I've only observed the OA's actions to be benevolent, like a father guiding and protecting a child. Many will cite the Origin Address and its actions to call HEX a scam, but here is my take on what the Origin Address has done and what it means. How is HEX structured and poised for success? To do that, we're going to need to rely on the adage, actions speak louder than words, because there have been hints from the founder, but nothing has been definitively stated or declared. The Origin Address was prepared to take full advantage of every day of the HEX launch with 350 addresses loaded with Ethereum. It participated by sending Ethereum to the adoption amplifier almost daily. 2 questions. How does one fairly roll out a global currency? And how did the Origin Address participate in the HEX launch and adoption amplifier? Almost immediately after HEX launched, a live market was created where people could buy and sell HEX in the decentralized exchange if they didn't want to participate in the adoption amplifier. This was critical for HEX in its first year because it allowed for market price discovery and a price chart while HEX was hyperinflating. But if on a slow day, only a small number of people participated in the adoption amplifier, they made outsized returns, which could then be dumped on the market, tanking the HEX price, and they would have more Ethereum to participate the next day. This is called arbitrage, and the OA was prepared for it. The OA began to bid each day in the adoption amplifier. At the very end of the day, before the HEX contract dispersed the rewards to AA participants, and what was the result? The OA received the lion's share of the HEX dispersed in the pool for that day. And everyone else who participated in the adoption amplifier received roughly the same amount of HEX they would have received if they purchased it in the open market. This effectively turned the adoption amplifier into an over-the-counter way to bid on large amounts of HEX, so whales can participate without losing money buying in a shallow market. What else did this accomplish? The OA's daily participation in the adoption amplifier blunted the arbitrage opportunity for malicious actors in HEX's infancy and gave HEX critical price discovery in its first year while it hyperinflated. Question: what happened on Big Payday? Just a few days before the November 19th, 2020 Big Payday event, the 350 OA addresses began staking all of its HEX to claim its share of the Big Payday payout. This freaked a lot of people out because nobody was told this was going to happen, and lots of people bailed on HEX and called it a scam very loudly. What actually took place on Big Payday? The OA claimed the vast majority of the Big Payday bonus, but the stakes locked up for that day received a 30% bonus on their principal. HEX stakes locked up for 5 years or longer received a 60% bonus, and 10+ year stakes received a 100% bonus on their principal. So to celebrate the end of the HEX launch, stakers received a nice bonus, and those who locked up for longer received a larger one-time bonus of the unclaimed HEX reserved for the Bitcoin free claim. The hyperinflation slowed to 3.69% annual inflation of minted supply, paid only to stakers in the share pool, and the adoption amplifier went away forever. 2 more questions. How was this good for HEX and everyone who participated? And what has the Origin address done with all of its HEX? The Origin address's staking to claim its Big Payday bonus removed a lot of coins from being dumped on the market, so it protected HEX's market price again. Also, minting most of the Big Payday bonus up front raises the daily payout to stakers in the share pool because HEX inflates 3.69% of minted supply. The inflation paid to yesterday's stakes has never been minted, and most of it won't be minted for a long time because each daily payout is spread across 15 years of stakes. So minting almost a third of the entire HEX supply up front raised the daily payout in the share pool by roughly 18%. Again, benefiting stakers. You see the pattern of behavior here? I had to discern this all on my own, while everyone was crying scam, with zero guidance from Richard Hart, the founder, as to why this was happening. Question: what happens if 100% of the HEX supply is staked? Then the average length stake will earn 3.69% APY, and longer than average stakes will earn more for longer. What happens if only 10% of the HEX supply is staked, which is currently the case? Then the average length stake in the share pool is earning 38% APY, while longer stakes earn more for longer. Staking for the average length of 6.7 years today, as of December 2022, would begin yielding 21% and should trend higher over time as the share rate they locked in appreciates in the pool. Wait, what? Only 10% of the supply is currently staked? Where's the other 90%? Why isn't it staked earning high yield? The end result of everything I just told you is that 90% of the HEX supply is sitting on those 350 Origin address wallets, not for sale on the open market and not being staked, which is how you get 38% APY from a coin that only inflates 3.69% per year. The Origin addresses are being diluted by not staking, and stakers are currently benefiting massively from that. Here is a video recorded before the Big Payday of Richard Hart when asked why those wallets aren't staking.
So my own view of this is that all this HEX is sitting on the sidelines, not staked. They'd be crazy not to stake.
Probably, yeah. I mean, if you want more HEX and it doesn't cost you much and you only have to stake for a day, seems like a good way to get more HEX. But you don't,
Sure.
I mean, you don't know because the same logic applies to now. So like they could stake now and get more HEX. So a theory, like no one knows, but a theory is that the people that aren't staking are doing so to, one, drive up the rewards for the staker class to be competitive with all the other crap out there offering rates, and two, drive up the market cap because stake tax is burnt and therefore it disappears and doesn't count for the market cap calculation any longer. So if you want higher rewards to the stakers and you want a higher market cap, then someone has to be not staked. You know what I mean? So there's
Yeah, very.
there's game theory in this. So if you want the value of HEX to increase, it is very useful to have a competitive interest landscape. Because a lot of people advertising high interest rates. Fraudulently or realistically, if you want to compete on message, a high interest rate is important.
This is a read between the lines moment, because declaring that is a promise which gives investors expectations of what is going to happen in the future. Regulators look for forward-looking statements that create expectations of profit solely from the work of others, which gives them regulatory authority over that entity. When Bitcoin launched, its anonymous founder Satoshi Nakamoto was the only person mining it. In the beginning, Satoshi Nakamoto owned the vast majority of the Bitcoin in existence. Satoshi Nakamoto has not been identified, seen, or heard from since 2010. And those Bitcoin he first mined are still sitting unmoved on wallets that he may or may not control. 1 million Bitcoin, currently valued at $17 billion, which today is only about 5% of the total Bitcoin supply. But 12 years ago was the vast majority of the Bitcoin supply. Is Satoshi Nakamoto going to sell those coins? No one knows. He never said what he was going to do with them, and he hasn't been heard from since 2010. Had Satoshi claimed that he was going to use his Bitcoin to buy ad space on television to promote Bitcoin, investors would get excited and regulators would have a reason for oversight to make sure Satoshi made good on his promise. Do you see the issue here? Richard Hart is not anonymous. He's an active participant in the HEX community that he clearly founded. But does he have access to 90% of the HEX that's currently not staked? Nobody knows for sure, because that would create expectations. In my opinion, this is not done to circumvent securities laws. This is done to circumvent expectations investors might have. But more on securities laws in a moment. I said a moment ago that 90% of the HEX supply is not for sale. Do I know this for sure? No. What I know is Richard Hart, the founder, who has been very careful with his words, has asked for anyone to show him via Chainalysis where the origin addresses, which are known to the HEX community, with their transactions public for all to view on the blockchain. Hart has asked if anyone can show him where the origin address has ever sold a single HEX before in its life. I can imagine Richard Hart would like to continue asking that question. Richard Hart has also stated that based on Chainalysis, the origin address does not like to sell or stake HEX. Question: how else does the origin address protect HEX and benefit stakers? Well, 90% of the HEX supply appears to be off the table, while 100% of its inflation is paying the 10% currently staked over 15 years. One benefit of this is that malicious actors are less likely to buy up large quantities of HEX to generate yield to fund, say, terrorism. Large venture capital investors are used to participating in pre-mine rounds of closed-door deals at insane discounts. Then they have the option to dump that on the open market after the average retail investor has 10x the price. That opportunity was available to all for the 350-day launch, and now only 10% of the supply wants to stake for yield. And I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying. I don't believe venture capitalists and big institutional money understands what HEX is yet. But if they'd like to earn high yield in a high-performing asset, they're going to have to buy HEX from a hexagon in the open market. This is how HEX is currently structured, and the origin address never has to make another move again. And I'm not saying or even suggesting that it won't move again. I'm just pointing out the current posture of how HEX and the 10% locked up in the share pool is poised to control 50% of the total supply of HEX over the next 10 years. Question: is there anything else I need to know about the origin address? Yes. One more thing. In HEX, when stakers fail to keep their commitment to the contract by ending stakes early or late, they are penalized. 50% of those penalties will always and forever go to the origin address, and the other 50% is distributed to the HEX share pool to reward the stakers who keep their commitment. Now, considering the OA controls 90% of the supply, it doesn't seem like a big deal that it gets half of the penalties forever. But it does suggest that there's a purpose for the OA, that it will continue to receive HEX into the future to fund whatever it wants to fund. There's an infinite amount of ways to roll out a global decentralized currency, but there's a very limited, constrained number of ways to do it right, where early adopters benefit in a way that still leaves meat on the table for newcomers. Currencies are ultimately backed by faith, belief, and trust. In HEX, locking your money away for longer confirms that faith, belief, and trust, and is highly rewarded. Question: what about the agenda of the origin address? How can I put any faith, belief, and trust into it if I don't know what it is or who controls it? Richard Hart has said that his long-term agenda is funding longevity research so that he and everyone else can live longer. More on that in the Richard Hart video of HEX Mastery. Now, there's a chance the OA goes in that direction, but all behavior thus far points to benefiting stakers and defending the HEX price. Speaking of agendas, let's highlight a couple that are moving forward with or without our approval. Amazon took over Walmart with a website to dominate retail. What's Jeff Bezos' mission and agenda? How about Bill Gates? Microsoft Windows is intimately commingled with every company and institution, from the military to universities to banks, etc. Let's hope that agenda is aimed in the right direction. How about the agenda of the United States dollar money printer that's privately owned by a cartel of bankers who run and operate the Federal Reserve? Did you know the United States dollar is a private currency owned by not the American people? Let's hope our foreign policy, going back the last 50 years, wasn't the result of that agenda. I don't know what their agendas are, but I know we're still living with them. Question: what if the origin address sells or stakes all of its HEX? Richard Hart stated that the HEX launch was rumored to take in 1 million Ethereum. Since that time, the Ethereum price has gone from $200 to $4,800. And Richard Hart called the Ethereum top in this last cycle to the day, weeks in advance. If he sold 1 million Ethereum for $4,800 each, he's sitting on nearly $5 billion. Does he need to sell HEX? Was he compensated for his amazing innovation? Hart has stated that this is about glory and legacy for him. He's been rich and retired since he was 25. He wants to make a difference in the world. If the OA did sell, all I can say is that cheap HEX is cheap access to high yield in an immutable yield-generating share pool. As far as the staking goes, there's two scenarios. The origin address could stake for yield, effectively giving everyone who staked the same haircut, reducing the overall payout evenly, and the result would be a lower inflation rate for HEX over time. Scenario 2 is the origin address could stake billions of HEX for 5,555 days and emergency end stake it the next day, resulting in a 100% penalty of the entire stake. The shares would be removed from earning yield in the share pool. 50% of the penalty would go back to the origin address, and 50% would be spread across 15 years of stakes and a massive payout on that day. Now, I doubt that will ever happen either, though, but it's a possibility. Now, hopefully I've covered this candidly and objectively without too much bias, but fairly, as someone who was highly invested and paying attention to things as they transpired. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please click the like and subscribe buttons to be notified of future HEX training videos. And if you are ready to invest in HEX and want to learn the strategy that I used for creating passive income through a HEX staking ladder, I just recorded an online course for you called HEX Mastery. I show you the step-by-step process to invest safely so that you have the knowledge to manage your own financial future. Click below or go to hexmastery.com to sign up.